From the world of politics to the world of business, this is Balance of Power. Live from Washington, D.C.
From Bloomberg's Washington, D.C. studios to our TV and radio audiences worldwide, welcome to Balance of Power. I'm Joe Matthew. Donald Trump announces his picture on the SEC, tapping former Republican SEC Commissioner Paul Atkins to replace Gary Gensler. The founder of Potomac Global Partners expected to cut regulations and embrace crypto if confirmed. We'll have the latest from Bloomberg Intelligence ahead. Trump's nominee for defense secretary, meantime, in damage control mode. Pete Hegseth meeting today with key senators amid allegations of sexual assault and mismanagement of a veterans nonprofit. And as lawmakers now face a funding deadline in just 16 days, we'll be joined by Congresswoman Haley Stevens of Michigan. And it's a vote of no confidence today in France as far-right leader Marine Le Pen learns together with a left-wing coalition to topple the government there, including a prime minister only 3 months into the job. We'll discuss this developing story with former French diplomat and ambassador Jean-Marie Guéhenno. Thanks for being with us today on the Wednesday edition of Balance of Power. A very newsy day in Washington and around the world. We'll start with Donald Trump's pick for Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth making the rounds again today on Capitol Hill, meeting with key Republican senators, including incoming Majority Leader John Thune. That's how he began his day, and Hegseth spoke to reporters following that meeting about his conversations with senators and his mission for the job.
That's what Donald Trump asked me to do. Your job is to bring a warfighting ethos back to the Pentagon. Your job is to make sure that it's lethality, lethality, lethality. Everything else is gone. Everything else that distracts from that shouldn't be happening. That's the message I'm hearing from senators in that advise and consent process. It's been a wonderful process.
Joining us now for a closer look, Bloomberg's Texas bureau chief, Julie Fine. A lot of folks are looking at this as a last-ditch effort to save this nomination, Julie. Even Hegseth's mother went on television this morning to try to clarify or clean up a letter that she had purportedly leaked to the media, making it clear that she thought her son was a womanizer. Can he put this behind him?
Well, Joe, certainly you don't want to go through this process with your mother defending you, first of all, on television. And then you just saw him there. That was not a person that was extremely comfortable and confident about what's happening next. I mean, he says he still has President Trump's support. Obviously, he does have it right now. However, we are already hearing names like Ron DeSantis thrown into the mix. So if everything's going perfectly, you don't have those issues happening. Now, let's talk a little bit about his day. I mean, he met with several senators. Joni Ernst, extremely important to this process, tweeting, "I appreciate Pete Hegseth's service to our country, something we both share." Today, as part of the confirmation process, we had a frank and thorough conversation. Joe, you don't see at the end of that her saying, "I feel very confident with this, and he will have my vote." So certainly right now he is still trying. He still says he's in it to win it, but he needs a lot to happen in the next few weeks to make this a slam dunk.
Yeah, that's right. It was a thorough conversation, period. Pretty cut and dry here, Julie. Just quickly, you mentioned Ron DeSantis. There are multiple reports that Donald Trump has spoken with him about potentially filling this role if Hegseth doesn't make it. Is that the next step?
Well, I think if Hegseth does not make it, Ron DeSantis is certainly a very intriguing person for that job. And look at Ron DeSantis. I mean, right now, what is his path in Florida? I mean, in 4 years, it could be J.D. Vance on that ticket and Ron DeSantis obviously wanting to be president. So this gives him a very high-profile position here. So obviously, if his name is being floated out there, Pete Hegseth's got a real problem.
Bloomberg's Texas bureau chief Julie Fine. Great to have you with us, Julie. As we turn to President-elect Trump's other announcements, we had a flurry of appointments emerge today, nominations including a role that we've been keenly awaiting here at Bloomberg TV and radio. That's the chair of the Securities and Exchange Commission, Paul Atkins, the former commissioner of the SEC. That choice to replace Gary Gensler. And joining us now for more, Bloomberg's Gregory Cordy with us at the table here in Washington. Gregory, lower regulations, more crypto seems to be the idea and would easily be confirmed. How do you see it?
Yeah, he seems to be the exact opposite of Gary Gensler, who is the current chairman of the Securities and Exchange Commission, who has said he's going to depart on January 20th as Trump comes in. It's a 5-year term, but traditionally the president gets to pick, his majority. There will be Republican majority on the commission now, and Trump will get to pick the chairman, Paul Atkins. 3 things that we're watching very closely. One is he says he doesn't like big fines against companies. If you're going to protect investors, it doesn't make sense to levy huge fines that the investors eventually are going to have to pay.
Yeah, right.
He's against this sort of being drowned in paperwork, climate disclosures, ESG disclosures. He's going to try to reduce that. And then, as you mentioned, he's very pro-crypto. We saw Bitcoin surging today, both on that news and also Jerome Powell saying some positive things about cryptocurrencies. So it's mostly baked in, but this is a very sort of market-oriented conservative choice for the president.
Fascinating. In the other chamber, of course, we have a better sense of what it's going to look like in the new Congress. Earlier today, House Speaker Mike Johnson had this to say about the very slim Republican majority in his chamber now that the final race has been called. Yes, the election actually ended just last night in California as a Republican seat flipped to Democratic. Here's the Speaker.
It looks like the final number will be 220 Republicans, 215 Democrats. And when 3 of our colleagues depart in the early part of the year, joining the administration, or one resign, it'll be 217 to 215. So, yes, do the math. We have nothing to spare. But all of our members know that. We talked about that today, as we do constantly, that this is a team effort, that we've got to all row in the same direction.
They better row in the same direction, Gregory, because if somebody gets a cold, the boat's going to sink. This could be a majority of 1 if Donald Trump's House members tapped for administration jobs are cleared.
Yeah, I went back and I looked at the history of this from the Office of the House Historian. And you have to go back to 1931 before you get a House this evenly divided.
Wow.
In that year, at the first midterms of the Great Depression, Republicans lost 52 seats, but ended up with a 2-seat majority. The problem was 14 members-elect died before the Congress could be sworn in. And even though Republicans won on Election Day, through special elections, Democrats were able to win the speakership. That's the kind of margins that we're talking about.
Yeah.
And if I'm Speaker Johnson, I make a rule that no 2 Republicans can drive in the same car together, else he loses his majority.
That would literally be the majority in that world. A morbid thought, but great analysis from Bloomberg's Gregory Korte. Can't you wait for next year? Thank you both for the reporting and analysis. Coming up, we'll have a look at the shakeup in France today. Political turmoil following a no-confidence vote with Jean-Marie Guillemot, former French diplomat, professor at Columbia University. He's next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. I'm Joe Matthew in Washington. We thank you for joining us. Today, France's current government fell after losing a no-confidence vote in Parliament. Marine Le Pen's far-right party teamed up with a left-wing coalition to topple the government. We watched it happen today in real time, ousting Prime Minister Michel Barnier's administration after only 3 months. Joining us now for more, Bloomberg's Rosalind Matheson. Roz, it's great to have you with us here. This happened so quickly. A lot of Americans are still catching up. Was it simply his decision to jam through this budget that upset the left and the right, or was there more to it?
Well, this is obviously going to be a fragile government to begin with, because after the election that we saw in the middle of the year, we had a good rump in Parliament with Marine Le Pen and her group, but we also had the left coalition parties banding together in Parliament. So it was always going to be fragile and difficult if you're trying to enact structural economic change in that environment and really, try and trim down that budget deficit that's quite high. That means that you have to take decisions that people generally don't like. And so what you saw in the recent months was like Parliament really struggling there, Barnier really struggling, and having to make concessions, over and over again to try and get his budget through, but balking at the last minute on the big final thing that these parties wanted. And therefore they said, well, fine, if you're not going to do what we say, we're going to have a no confidence motion against you. And oddly, the left and the right, two parts of French politics that generally don't like each other, don't talk to each other, working together here because they have a common enemy, which was the French budget that they didn't like. And so voting together today to collapse the government.
Bloomberg's Rosalind Matheson, we thank you so much for the insights. Today on the early edition of Balance of Power, we spent a lot of time on this as it was happening while we spoke with Catherine Kleppinger, professor of French studies at George Washington University. We spoke just before the vote results. Here's what she had to say about Marine Le Pen setting a trap for Emmanuel Macron.
France risks becoming ungovernable after, the June snap elections. Marine Le Pen from the Rassemblement National is, I think, playing a very kind of astute and remarkable game here. I think she wants this government to fall. And, some analyses I've read is basically that he fell into her trap.
Joining us now for more, Jean-Marie Guillemot, professor of practice at International Public Affairs at Columbia University, former French diplomat and ambassador. Mr. Ambassador, welcome to Bloomberg TV and radio. We appreciate your expertise today. How difficult will it be for Emmanuel Macron to pick up the pieces?
Very difficult, because he has no majority. The parliament is divided into three roughly equivalent groups. He has tried a government with the center-right. He could try a government with the left, but I don't think he wants to do that. The talk in Paris is of a government that would be either with someone from his own party or someone from the center-left who could attract some socialists. But this will be a very weak government if it comes to pass. And many are predicting just another motion of no confidence in the coming months.
Well, Ambassador, there were such high hopes for Michel Barnier, the EU's chief negotiator during Brexit, a longtime political operative, a son of Savoie and a self-proclaimed Charles de Gaulle conservative. How was he so easily dispatched?
Well, he had an impossible task from day one. Now people think that he did not pay enough attention to his own base. That is, he was from a smaller party within the center-right. He didn't pay much attention to the party of Macron, who was unhappy with him. And then he began negotiating with Marine Le Pen. I mean, he says it was not a negotiation, but it looked more and more like a negotiation. And Marine Le Pen, I think, has decided that it's better to precipitate a crisis than to have a weak government. I mean, the calculation of Barnier was that Marine Le Pen wanted to polish her image as a respectable politician who was no longer a disruptive politician. I think Marine Le Pen now sees that she has serious judiciary trouble. She might she might not be able to run for election if the trouble gets worse. And so she probably thinks that accelerating the agenda, the political agenda, trying to go after Macron is what is best for her at the moment. And that's also the view of the extreme left. I think this crisis, it's about Barnier, but it's much more about Macron in the end. What both the extreme right and the extreme left want is to force Macron to leave the presidency. They have no legal power to do it, but if successive governments are paralyzed, then they have a shot at it.
Of course, there's business to be had, Professor, before that happens, a funding deadline. They need a budget by December 21st, a finalized budget for next year. That's just a day after our own government runs out of money unless something is taken care of here. What happens if they miss that deadline? Well,
if they miss that deadline, what happens is that the government, I mean, the temporary, the government, either this government or a new government, will propose a law to just extend the budget of 2024 to 2025. So I don't think a shutdown, the sort of American-style shutdown, is likely, but there could be a temporary budget which extend the taxes, which expand the spending authorization of the budget of 2024. But that's just a breathing space to have a new budget in 2025.
You know, there are questions here today in Washington, as I'm sure you have already heard in the last 24 hours, about what this means, of course, for the U.S. relationship with France, but also what it will mean for France's support of the war effort in Ukraine. What's your answer to that?
Foreign policy is not a big part of the discussion at the moment in France, let's be honest. But France is very inward-looking at the moment. It's focused on its own issues. I think what it means is a very weak France in Europe at a moment where Germany is also weak. And it's rare that both countries have been weak at the same time. So it means no real leadership to push Europe in one direction or another. So I think it's not good news for Ukraine. Although in the French constitution, the president has real powers and authority. So I don't expect a rapid change in French policies, but I do expect a sort of very passive France, and very hard for France to convince other members of the European Union to have a bold, forward-looking policy in the present situation.
Well, you were, of course, United Nations Under-Secretary General for Peacekeeping Operations from 2000 to 2008. So this is not a strange topic to you. Emmanuel Macron has repeatedly tried to lead a charge toward peace in Ukraine. Will he try to emerge as a peacemaker in the months ahead once Donald Trump arrives in the White House?
Well, I think it's a tough question because I'm not sure that there is a real space for a peace deal in Ukraine at the moment. I think for President Zelensky, it's essential to have security guarantees at a minimum, and security guarantees which would be hard security guarantees, that is deployment of Western troops, at least European troops in Ukraine. And I'm not sure that President Putin would buy that. So I think the red lines of President Putin and the red lines of Zelensky make it very difficult for a peace deal to be had in the coming weeks or months.
Michel Barnier becoming the first prime minister in France to be ousted in more than 60 years. Jean-Marie Guillemot, just the voice we needed today. Professor at Columbia University, former French diplomat and ambassador. We thank you for being with us on Bloomberg. Coming up, Paul Atkins picked by President-elect Trump to lead the SEC today. We'll dive into what this means for crypto next with an expert. It's Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
It's a very creaky construct, with respect to financial services regulation, lots of different players, lots of costs that are added, lots of ways in which the rules impede financial innovation. People take risks and they may lose all the money by investing in something, but that's their right.
That's Paul Atkins talking crypto regulation in a podcast interview in February of last year. Fast forward to today, President-elect Trump nominated him to be the next chair of the Securities and Exchange Commission. Here with more is someone who's followed this very closely for us, Nathan Dean at Bloomberg Intelligence, where he is senior U.S. policy analyst. Nathan, the crypto space, the markets kind of saw this one coming. I'm guessing you're not surprised by this pick. Will he sail through confirmation?
I think so. I think Commissioner Atkins, because he used to be a commissioner back in the early 2000s, I think Commissioner Atkins is probably going to get through because he's not really much of a controversial pick. I mean, his mantra is deregulation. So when he said in that piece, free market, that's exactly what it means. cutting regulatory red tape. Now, what does this mean for crypto? Well, the first thing is that you're going to have an ease of the enforcement risk. So if you're a crypto platform like Coinbase, right, you're engaged in an enforcement action with the SEC, there's been this enforcement albatross neck across the crypto sector that essentially goes away. He's either going to loosen it up, shrink it down, but for the most part, enforcement risk isn't really going to be there. But then what's the next step? Is he going to engage in rulemaking on crypto? Is he going to bring clarity on crypto?
Right.
We think he will, but I think it's going to be more of a second-tier issue. I think Congress is going to move first. They'll pass a bill. They'll say, okay, I think this is what the cryptocurrency framework should look like. And then it'll be up to Commissioner, potentially Chairman Atkins, to then promulgate that rule and push it out. You were looking probably around the mid of 2026 for that to happen.
Okay. No rally in crypto today. Is that because it was already factored into the market here?
Yeah, I think it was already factored in. Look, I mean, we had several days notice that, Paul Atkins was the one that President Trump was considering. But also, I would just remember is that outside of that enforcement risk, there's really no immediate catalysts that comes with the new SEC chair. Yes, Gary Gensler is no longer at the SEC. Yes, the enforcement angle is not there for the crypto space. But I would say just for the retail investor, they're playing the long-term game here, and I don't think there were any immediate catalysts.
Is this setting up a standoff between the new SEC chair, the new Commerce Secretary, the new trade rep? Who's going to have the final call on some of this stuff?
Well, I think it just depends on what the primary issue is. Let me just go back to what is the SEC's role. The SEC's role is to be the primary securities regulator for the United States. Commerce and trade and so forth, they usually don't play in the securities. Now, if you want to talk about writ large, the economic, this is where the soap opera begins.
Yes.
Because President Trump has a Wall Street wing, Scott Bessent, Paul Atkins and so forth. But you also have a very pro-tariff wing coming out there in terms of, also other picks.
So is that by design? Is that to create some sort of internal tension, or we're in for some turbulence here?
I think there's always going to be turbulence with this type of, when you have these many people with different ideas and so forth like that. But if you go back to tariffs, our message to the clients has always been, we think tariffs are a negotiation tool for President Trump, lots of headline risk. But ultimately, as the process plays out and as President Trump signs those executive orders, they'll most likely will direct the Commerce Department to come back and say, here's our recommendation. He'll be negotiating with China, Canada, Mexico, and we'll see what the final aspect of that is.
Fascinating. Gary Gensler leaves the building January 20th, right? That's at least what his stated plan is here. What does he do next?
Obviously he was a professor at MIT. He's
is it back to academia?
I think it's probably back to academia. I mean, we've seen that, but also I think Gary, he doesn't need a job if he doesn't want it. So, I think, he's an avid mountain climber, so maybe he'll do some of that as well.
That's fine. So was the French Prime Minister, by the way, an avid mountain climber and hiker, so we understand. Just 30 seconds left here. What's the first change he makes in the agency, assuming he's confirmed?
So I think it's the enforcement aspect, but we're telling clients, don't be afraid. Watch out for this idea of Reg NMS, the equity market structure.
Yeah.
He dissented against this in 2005, and he may come back on it.
This is why we had to talk to Nathan Dean. Thank you, sir. Bloomberg Intelligence with us on Balance of Power. Coming up, Donald Trump's tariff proposals we're just talking about on our neighbors to the north might have a strong domestic impact, as we'll discuss with Congresswoman Haley Stevens of Michigan. It's next on Balance of Power. This is Bloomberg. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. Thanks for joining us. I'm Joe Matthew in Washington. On the early edition of Balance of Power today, I spoke with Ambassador Kirsten Hillman, Canada's ambassador to the U.S., who was in the room at Mar-a-Lago last week alongside Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and gave us a fly-on-the-wall view of what took place in a conversation that centered around tariffs and foreign policy, including Donald Trump's impact on NATO and the war in Ukraine.
I think that there is a very strong desire to continue to support Europe, support NATO. I think that it becomes complicated through transitions because new governments have to commit to achieving the goals that they have been elected on, and those often cost money. So, but in terms of supporting the people of Ukraine, I think in that regard, the alliance remains strong.
Well, part of the reason why there are questions about all of this is because of the incoming Trump administration and some of his challenges with NATO and some of his previous statements about what's happening in Ukraine. And I don't know if you have a take on that. I guess we'll watch this play out as it will once Donald Trump is in office. But you just spent some time at Mar-a-Lago quite famously in this sit-down with Prime Minister Trudeau and President-elect Trump. We read that this lasted over 3 hours. What was it like?
Well, I'll be honest. It was quite a joyous evening. The whole, because it was holiday weekend, and it was right on the terrace of Mar-a-Lago. There were children kind of running around in their fancy clothes, and families having dinner together. And then the table with the president and the prime minister and guests was sort of right in the middle of all of that. So it had a real sense of holiday and celebration and fun. Obviously, they talked about a lot of important issues. It was 3 hours, but it was also an opportunity to reconnect.
So it was cordial. Yes. There was laughing.
Lots of laughing.
That's fascinating to hear. I'd love to ask you a bit about this argument over tariffs, but how does it come together when Donald Trump puts something on social media and a short time later the Prime Minister of Canada is on an airplane to Florida? Is that just the way politics are had now? How did that whole trip emerge?
So what happened was the day at the tariff announcement was put up on social media, the Prime Minister called the President, and they talked about a variety of things, but obviously they talked about this tariff announcement. And the Prime Minister said to the President, "I'd really like to come and see you, Donald. We should talk about this some more." And he said, "Well, why don't you come for dinner on Friday, 7:30 at Mar-a-Lago?" That's exactly what happened.
And then the Prime Minister asked you, "Should we go?"
And I said, yes, please. And then I guess just over the course of the few days as it came together, other guests and other sort of allies and incoming members of the Trump administration also joined in, or were going to be down there and joined in. So it was a very...
It was a big table.
It was a big table, and it was a very substantive table. We talked about energy. We talked about security. We obviously talked about the border a lot. That was a very important feature of the conversation. So, yeah, no, it was terrific, and we're pleased that the two leaders who maybe in ways that people don't appreciate have sort of a camaraderie. They've known each other for a long time, and they've developed a relationship through, a lot of complicated times, COVID and, the renegotiation of NAFTA and all of it. So,
well, listen to you. You sound like you're ready to go back already, because a lot of the reporting was about tension over tariffs. He's talking about 25% tariffs on goods from not only Canada, but Mexico. If that actually happens, and maybe you can tell me it won't, based on what they discussed, would Canada reply in kind?
So, just to clarify, it was a lovely evening. It was fun and cordial, but the tariff discussion and discussion on the border and other priorities, these are serious discussions, and there was a lot of substantive things that were discussed as well.
Of course,
and maybe even more constructively so in a sense of friendship and partnership. On the tariffs, look, we don't think they're a good idea. They won't be good for Canada, and we don't think they're good for the United States. We have this massive and growing and strategic trade relationship. So we are really busy trying to make that case. Since President-elect Trump was last in office, Canadian-U.S. trade has gone up year on year since the renegotiation of the NAFTA. We are the biggest customer by far of U.S. exporters. 36 states count us as their number one export market. So it's really important, sort of in terms of actual volumes, but also in terms of what we trade together, some of the strategic goods that we don't want to be getting from our non-allied countries. So we're making that case, and we're hopeful that will win the day.
You can find my full conversation with Ambassador Kirsten Hillman, Canada's ambassador to the U.S., online and on the terminal. This is Balance of Power, Bloomberg TV and Radio. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and Radio. I'm Joe Matthew in Washington. We thank you for being with us here as Congress gets back to work. One of the things, maybe the thing at the top of the to-do list, is funding the government, because we will run out of money in, I believe it's 16 days right now. Yes, December 20. Joining us directly from the Capitol is Democratic Congresswoman Haley Stevens of Michigan. It's great to have you back, Congresswoman. Good to see you. I don't know your thoughts on this, or maybe you're hearing more than we are in the newsroom here, but so far no agreements even on top-line numbers. Can you assure our viewers and listeners we will not have a government shutdown in time for Christmas?
Look, I'd be very surprised if we ended this year with a government shutdown. The election has happened. People have accepted the results. And We want to make sure that the American people have a restful, peaceful end of the year. We don't want to inherit at the beginning of the quarter century mark a brutal government shutdown that's hurting our economy. And so hopefully a deal gets struck. Obviously, we're negotiating between the current administration that is now going to be outgoing in a month and a half, as well as Senate leadership that's going to change into the new year. So to be honest with you, Joe, what I'm doing as I'm on the Capitol is I'm listening to the reporters who are pulling my colleagues aside on the other side of the aisle and trying to listen in on what they're saying, because if the votes this week show you anything, it's a pretty closed box right now in terms of what these next couple of weeks are going to look like.
Well, that is for sure, and that should tell us a lot if you're trying to listen in on reporters' conversations with Republican lawmakers. Congresswoman, will Democrats back whatever the Republican majority emerges with here, whether it's kicking the can to March or even later in the year?
Well, I think talk of a full year continuing resolution funding of the government has some positives, and it also has some drawbacks. And certainly I know that communities in Oakland County who have submitted for community funding, who are waiting on some of these infrastructure dollars that come with the annual budget, I want to see that get done. On the other hand, I'd love to keep us at the levels that we've gotten under President Biden and Democrats in the past. So maybe there's a good deal to be struck here. I also know that our Democratic leader, Hakeem Jeffries, is certainly going to be at the table. And there's also going to be a whole host of things that a new Republican majority is going to be pushing for in their first 100 days under President Trump. And that's going to be an area where I've got to be prepared to roll up my sleeves. And frankly, I'm not so eager to just give a pass and give a blank check. There are deals that have been struck in the past that have been reconfigured and in some ways somewhat unfairly. And so we just want to make sure that as members of Congress, our regions, our taxpayers are getting their fair share, and that we've got stability. There's a lot of global dynamics at play here. Certainly the Defense Department, defense spending, that is also on the docket here. We're waiting for that defense appropriation, that final deal. I do a lot of work on hostages and pushing for the release of hostages. Thrilled to see that we just had 3 more from China come out. But we need to be funding some of those activities as we move forward as well.
Well, we had a pretty big development last evening, Congresswoman. You have a new colleague coming to the House from California as Adam Gray officially defeated Representative John Duarte in the 13th district. That means the election's actually over if you're still playing along on your home game, and it means that Republicans will have 220 to Democrats 215. You subtract those members Donald Trump has asked to join his administration, and we could be in a world in which Mike Johnson has a majority of 1 next year. That will require Democrats to work with Republicans to get anything done. What will be your posture then in the new Congress?
Yeah, it is absolutely one of the slimmest majorities in recent memory. And I'm going to tell you that we've got to be treated with respect. We can't be bulldozed or just thought that we're going to, roll over at the simple deadlines. If we're going to negotiate, we've got to adhere to the principles of negotiation. And I'm very eager to talk to the incoming administration about trade. Obviously, some of these tariffs that are very concerning to us in Michigan, as well as continued and proven industrial policy. We want to have a strong and healthy economy. We know that the American people want to see costs lowered. Well, that comes by investing in our communities, investing in domestic manufacturing, and not just slapping price increases and forcing the American taxpayer to pay for it. So that's one of the things where I want to have a voice at the table, Joe.
I hear you, and I want you to hold that thought on manufacturing, because right before you joined us, we were spending time with Canada's ambassador to the U.S., Kirsten Hillman, who talked about President-elect Donald Trump's plans for tariffs, in part with an eye on your state. Here's what she said.
On the tariffs, look, we don't think they're a good idea. They won't be good for Canada, and we don't think they're good for the United States. We are the biggest customer by far of U.S. exporters. 36 states count us as their #1 export market. So it's really important, sort of in terms of actual volumes, but also in terms of what we trade together, some of the strategic goods that we don't want to be getting from our non-allied countries. So we're making that case, and we're hopeful that will win the day.
Michigan is one of those 36 states she mentions, of course, Congresswoman, as somebody who helped the Obama administration keep the auto sector breathing through the Great Recession. How concerned are you? What will be the impact of these tariffs on Michigan?
Well, while the auto rescue was 15 years ago, I'll remind everybody that our Canadian counterparts were a huge part of that deal. The Canadian government was at the table with us every step of the way, the Canadian unions, the suppliers, and the like, and they really helped us to achieve what was a bipartisan rescue of the U.S. auto industry to secure the supply chains. And the Michigan-Canadian trade relationship is a very unique relationship. You know, we've just been building another bridge to connect the Detroit area to Canada. We've got billions of dollars of exporting and importing that takes place. Our automotive sector is completely reliant on it, and I know that businesses don't want to start off on the wrong note with this administration, and that they see President Trump obviously going to an extreme place for negotiation. It was great to see Mr. Trudeau visit with President Trump down in Mar-a-Lago, and that the meeting was respectful and seemed to have some humor to it as well as some positivity. But I know that we need to renegotiate that North American trade deal, USMCA, and make it work for American consumers, make it work for our auto industry. We need to be pushing back on China's dumping together. What they're doing in Mexico, particularly with electric vehicles, is astounding. China is now the largest exporter of vehicles in the world, surpassing Japan and other countries. Right. And so we've got to take that seriously, and we need to bring our allies along with it. Punching them in the nose doesn't always work. You saw Mexico's reaction. I'm hoping we can get to a place, particularly with Canada, given how sacred and important that trade relationship is, and because we know that it will only hurt the American consumer and our small businesses.
Well, I want to ask you in our remaining moment about another issue while you're with us, Congresswoman. You held an event today that we had our eyes on your Thyroid Disease Care Act. You appeared before reporters with a cancer survivor. I just wonder, the political climate we're talking about in this next Congress would have the support for such a bill? Will you get a vote?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, it was very important to me to introduce this bill in the last month of this legislative session, because we know that as a new Congress forms, we're going to reintroduce that bill. We're going to solicit new members of Congress to join us. In many respects, thyroid diseases are way overlooked. They're under-researched. They impact women in particular at an alarming rate. 1 in 8 women tend to be impacted by thyroid conditions, and this is the silent suffering of a lot of Americans who feel fatigued, their body's changing, they're struggling to get good access. So we want to invest in the research, but we also want to come up with a national study so that we've got a direction to go in as a country, and so that we can fully employ people in these amazing manufacturing jobs that we have and this incredible innovation economy. We want everyone feeling their best, and that's a part of what today's announcement was, and I so appreciate you asking me about it.
Well, I appreciate that answer, and I'm glad you made your way from the floor on a busy evening for voting. Democratic Congresswoman Haley Stevens of Michigan, we thank you as always. Coming up, Donald Trump's cabinet picks making pretty big news today. We'll have that more with our political panel coming up next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
These are people that are hired by the federal government, working in an environment where they are assaulting other employees of the federal government. It is up to the federal government to protect those employees. One way we do that, and we make sure that this behavior doesn't happen, is by letting them know up front, if you are convicted of these crimes, you will be stripped of that pension.
Republican Senator Joni Ernst of Iowa on Balance of Power back in May, discussing a bill that she co-sponsored that would impact pensions for federal employees convicted of certain sex crimes. Their bill is currently sitting in committee. Senator Ernst meeting today with Defense Secretary pick Pete Hegseth, posting this on social media afterwards. Quote, "I appreciate Pete Hegseth's service to our country, something we both share. Today, as part of the confirmation process, we had a frank and thorough conversation," unquote. Yeah, that was it. And joining us now, our political panel, Christy Setzer, president, founder of New Heights Communications, Democratic strategist, alongside Republican strategist Lester Munson, co-head of international practice at BGR Group. Great to have both of you here. There seems to be a sense, Lester, that this Hegseth situation is going to be done by the end of the week. Does he still have a chance to be confirmed?
Well, I suppose he still has a chance until he formally withdraws, but that Ernst statement is Senate speak for this guy has a big problem.
Meeting didn't go well.
The meeting may have gone well, but and she's a very good senator, and by the way, potentially a member of the cabinet at some point.
Yeah.
But I think the news on him has been of a nature that it's in serious jeopardy, and the president asking senators to vote on him may not be a good idea.
We should remind our audience that Joni Ernst has not only made sexual assault in the military an important cause from her office, but she's also a veteran. Right. And Pete Hegseth has said repeatedly that women should not be serving in combat. Will Joni Ernst be the end of this pick?
I think she'll be one of the people who will be the end of this
Does
pick.
he get to a confirmation hearing?
No, I don't think so. I think he ends up withdrawing before that, because this has become a bit of a choose-your-own adventure of which allegations or facts do you find the most problematic about him. Is it the fact that he's terrible to women? Is it his actual policy positions on the military? Is it his, rank in experience in the military? Is it the fact that even his own mother thinks that he's kind of a bad guy, right? So no, I think that the preponderance of allegations and facts sort of that are coming out against him shows that he does not have much of a chance.
Well, Mom might take issue with what you just said, because a remarkable bit of optics today. Yeah. His mother went on Fox News. This is Penelope Hegseth, to set the record straight on comments that she made about her son's history with women. Here's what she said.
They were going through, Pete and his wife at the time were going through a very difficult divorce. It was a very emotional time, and I'm sure many of you across the country understand how difficult divorce is on a family. There's emotions. We say things, and I wrote that in haste. I wrote that with deep emotions. I wrote that as a parent. About 2 hours later, I retracted it with an apology email, but nobody's seen that.
Yet somehow it still ended up in the New York Times. Lester, what does it say when your mother has to come out in your defense?
That's not an ideal situation, Joe.
No.
By the way, the mom looked terrific on TV and is very well spoken. Maybe she's auditioning for a cabinet appointment as well.
I hadn't heard that. Does it say more about his situation, or does she actually help him recover from this?
It's open question. This is up to the Senate. At the end of the day, what this is about is whether senators can defend a vote for the nominee back home and get reelected if they're, in fact, seeking reelection. That's the acid test here.
Okay.
So looking at how Senator Ernst and others have talked about the meetings, I think there's a pretty clear indication here that this thing is time limited.
Fascinating. Well, we got a couple of new names today. We spent some time earlier talking about the new pick for SEC. Haven't mentioned Peter Navarro's name yet. He's coming back as senior counselor for trade and manufacturing. As a Democrat watching this unfold, does the next Trump administration feel different than the first one when you see names like this?
So obviously he's shooting for the stars right now with his people that are the most controversial. He's clearly the velociraptor in Jurassic Park, testing all the doors and seeing what he can get through.
Wow, that's quite an image.
Thank you. And so, no, at this point, I don't think I'm surprised by Peter Navarro. I think it does pose a strategic question, though, for Democrats and Republicans, which is who are the nominees that you are going to find the most issue with? Is it people who have, criminal allegations and problems against them? Is it, again, you have to sort of look at people that you just find inexperienced, people that are corrupt, et cetera. You've kind of got an array of choices.
What do you make, Lester, of the elements of the economic team? Now that we have the SEC chair, you throw Peter Navarro into a fishbowl with Lutnick and a trade representative all have their hands potentially on the wheel when it comes to tariffs. Who wins?
Well, probably the loudest voice in the room, or the one that's the last to speak to the president. Okay. This is a hardline group on trade issues. That is clear. The president sees that tariffs and trade issues generally are leverage for him in his conversations with other countries, and there's no sign at all that he's going to relent on any of those.
They all get confirmed, right? The economic
I think
team.
they can probably all get confirmed.
We'll spend more time talking about Hegseth and the rest, I suspect. Lester Munson, Christy Setzer, thank you so much for the insights. And check out the Washington Edition newsletter. We've done a lot of reporting today on these picks and on the no confidence vote in France. Find it on the terminal and online. We'll see you back here tomorrow on Bloomberg TV and radio.